Hi, welcome everyone. I'm France Hong, co-founder and CEO of Boodle AI, the makers of Boodlebox, and welcome to today's webinar, another in the continuing series of the accelerator we've created for collaborative AI in higher education. I'm pleased to have joining us today Dr. Lance Cummings. Lance, welcome.
Hello, nice to be here.
Great. Also, this is meant to be participatory and engaging, so I'm going to allow everyone who wants to join into the Zoom and come on screen or talk if they want. You're absolutely not required to, but I'm going to go ahead and give everyone that option if they want. So, but I'm going to focus the attention on you, Lance, because you're our guest today. So, Lance, well, let's just start off. Would love to hear your background and your AI journey.
Yeah, sure. So I am a professor in the English department at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I teach in the professional writing program. I actually spent during the way I encountered AI is through researching the creator economy. Actually, in our field, so my degree is in rhetoric and writing, and we actually have a long tradition of understanding writing as intertwined with technology. So the way that we think about writing, the way that we practice it has always been connected to technology in different ways. You know, for example, when the printing press came around, the way that we did writing changed, obviously. But anyway, I was doing research in the creator economy, which if you may not have heard that term, but you probably know what it is. This is people who are creating content direct to audiences online, often making a living doing it. And this actually rose a lot during COVID for obvious reasons. People had a lot of time on their hands, and they realized they had valuable content they could share, and that people would actually gather around them and pay them for the valuable content they were making. So think about like the YouTube creators, the Substackers, those kind of people out there. And actually that has risen 50% every year since 2020. But I actually ran into GPT-2 in around 2020, 2021. And I was pretty impressed, even at that stage. And I thought to myself, we're all going to be using this in 5 years. So I got to figure out how this works into the writing process. So I just started experimenting with it, probably mostly in secret, and then started actually experimenting, writing about how I was integrating AI in different ways and sharing that online. Some people were interested, but then once ChatGPT came around, a lot more people were paying attention to my thoughts about that. And I just continued to experiment with AI and share with that. And so really it was kind of, AI was kind of a side project that now it's become, kind of a main project in a lot of ways.
So, Lance, so just to clarify, so you teach content creation through writing as part of what
Yes.
you do. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. And I didn't know that was a thing. That's awesome.
And
Second, when ChatGPT came out, did you have this moment like, yes, this is what I've been talking about this whole time? Like everybody else finally gets it? Because I mean, I've talked to people who've experimented with GPT-3. I think you're the first person. I mean, GPT-2 was like barely literate, if I remember. Like it was like a glimpse of something, not even really like usable.
Well, yeah, so it was really interesting. I mostly in the early days was experimenting with poetry. So like I wasn't necessarily looking for coherent coherent text all the time. And it actually would get super weird at times.
Yeah.
Basically, I use this tool. It's called CopySpace now, copyspace.ai. It's still around. I still play around with a little bit, but it's kind of marketed towards copywriters and marketers. And so, it's the usual sales tactic of saying, okay, create good copy faster kind of thing, which wasn't really my interest. But I was like, okay, but how can I use this tool to explore writing in different ways? Because it was, I got like a free access to it, and it was one of the few accessible interfaces for AI at the time. And so one of the things that I would do, for example, is like write poems or write lines of poetry and then have AI guess what would come next, right? Um, then I would put the poem together in different way, patching things together. Like I wasn't like generating the whole poem because as you know, AI poems are not that great. Maybe they've improved. I haven't tried it in a while, but and then I would start like adding then okay, here's a new title for a poem. What would that look like based on the poem before that, right?
Yeah.
And then keep doing that until I had like 200 poems. Like I left the context window, right? But it would keep kind of building on things that I was writing. But one of the things that would happen though is that I would get really long. So it's one of those tools where you would get like you could generate 3 choices, and then you could kind of look through those different choices of what, and you could also manipulate how long those generations would be. So if you've used SodaWrite, for example, would be another example where you can write a paragraph and then you can generate like 3 ways it might continue, and you could choose one or not. But
Yeah.
anyway, like I would look through those, and there's some weird stuff. I describe it like looking at the subconscious of the internet. Like there's like serial
Right.
killers and sexual assault,
Right.
like things I
Yeah.
didn't want to read, but also then occasionally there would be,
Right.
or stereotypical poems, but then there would occasionally be this really interesting line. I'm like, oh, that's the one, and I would put it in the poem.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, then when then ChatGPT came about, I think I was actually pretty skeptical about it because I didn't really I don't necessarily at the time thought that the chat interface was the best way to use AI. In some ways, other interfaces work better for certain kinds of writing, but um, and I was a little skeptical about how good ChatGPT 3 and 4 was because obviously I wasn't generating large amounts of text with it, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, there's early adopters, there's earlier adopters, and then there's Lance talking to the id and ego of the internet, generating very metaphysical poetry. That's great. So talk to me about the very first time you introduced this in a classroom environment to students. What was it? What was the context? How did you do it?
Yeah, so what I did was one of the things that my goal as a professional writing instructor is not just to, teach them AI, teach them how to use AI, but to teach them how AI works. I want my students to not just be users of AI, but to be builders of AI. And so what I actually did was have them go on to the OpenAI playground. And if you don't know what that is, people who are attending, you can actually you can log into OpenAI, and it's kind of this playground that's behind ChatGPT. So you can use all those tools, but you can actually manipulate like the temperature, what models you're using. Now you can build assistants, which you can connect with automated workflow tools, and you can actually do it for not necessarily for free, but for a very low price. And so what I would do is I introduced it to them 2 weeks before ChatGPT came out. Actually, that
Oh,
was the first
wow.
time. Yeah, that was the first time. So we went to OpenAI because I thought that would be a really great place to to show them how it works, and show them all the little gauges behind it and all that stuff. And I even did this same workshop with tech writers the summer before, and a lot of people weren't impressed, right? Because you're sitting in the class, you have no context for what you're doing with the AI. You're just playing around, right? So, and I'm just showing them how it works. So, okay, put in this title. Now it's going to guess what comes next.
Yeah.
See what it comes up with, or ask it to do something, and then it will guess what the answer is. So you really get a sense for this is a guessing technology, just like what you have in your email, right? And then but then it's not very impressed. People aren't impressed because, well, you're not really using it for anything real. You're not giving it any sort of real context. So and then ChatGPT comes out, right? Which allows you to give that context easier. I think, really what ChatGPT does is make AI more accessible to more people, and it makes it easier to insert that context into what you're doing with the AI. So even then, I would say a lot of people were not that impressed with AI. You get a lot of people fooling around with it, but and I would say students, I think only now I see students, a number of students actually using it for serious things before they come to my class. But I would say the majority of them don't, from my experience. But I'm just in one little corner of the U.S. So
Yeah. So that was the very beginning. So literally pre-ChatGPT, you've got people you've opened up the plumbing behind OpenAI's GPT models. You're having people experiment. That is very, very early days. So now let's fast forward. Talk about your most recent use of AI in the classroom, and would love you to contrast like those experiences.
yeah, I'll actually give a similarity. So
Yeah.
like my goal is to show students how it works and how they can best shape it, and participate in the creation of AI, in the creation of AI tools. And the most recent activity would have been during, so I do a study abroad to Krakow, Poland.
Mhm.
And in the spring semester before that, I actually teach them different theories about communicating across cultures, and I also learn about Polish culture because we go to Poland, and then they actually do a design thinking project for a business partner there in Poland that they eventually visit. But one of the things I started experimenting this year, and I think I'm going to convert the class to mostly doing this kind of stuff, is having students structure notes about things that they learned about Poland that we can then put into a database that AI will be built on top of. So this class will constantly be developing an AI chat tool for people who are going to study abroad or do business in Poland. So you learn. It's not necessarily them using AI. It's them building the AI, and it requires them to learn something, and also requires them to write in a structured way. Now, we did explore using AI to come up with ideas on how to structure the notes best. And so, basically, what I mean by structuring a note is what elements are going to be common for each note. So let's say there's a historical event. We're going to have a bunch of notes about historical events. What are the components that are going to be common to all those notes, and then how are we going to label those, and then so that it's easier, well, for humans to see it, but also for AI to sort through that information as well. And so that's my most recent explorations that I've used, is actually building the AI.
Yeah. So between the so that's a large span of time in the AI
Yeah.
world, at least 18 months between those two experiences. What are some best practices you've learned? Like what's the one, two, or three things if you were talking to somebody who's wants to integrate AI into their coursework, their curriculum, their class, their department, what would you tell them?
I would say number one is use it yourself, and to experiment with it for real and serious things. And sometimes it takes more work on the up end. But once you start getting better at creating things with AI, it gets faster. So actually experiment with using it to generate assignments or to revise assignments, or to send out announcements to your class. Like, figure out how it works for your own content. I mean, as educators, we are content creators, most of us, unless, I guess, if you're just using a textbook and you're not, but you're still probably creating some content. But and then number two is experiment in front of students and with students. So actually do it in class or in a video, so that students can actually see how you're doing things. And even if it doesn't go right. So I think some of the best learning moments is when I'm trying to show them something how cool AI can do, but then it doesn't work. And so then we sit there and we figure out, well, why didn't it work, and how could we make this better? And then the other thing is to actually observe then how students are using AI. I would say don't make assumptions about how students are or not using AI. I think there's going to be a wide spectrum of how students approach AI and how they use them. And in fact, they're probably going to come up with things that we don't think of ourselves. So in the end, our understanding of AI must be collaborative on all levels. So not just between educators and developers, but also between educators and students, between writers and audiences, between developers and users, people who know like computer science and people who know writing. We need all people who know sociology to truly understand AI and its implications. We're going to need everybody on board. That's my opinion, anyway.
No, it's so I love those three best practices. So first, and each one of those, by the way, in the conversations I've had with higher education faculty and administrators, there's been a number of concerns raised. Your best practices actually mirror or touch upon each of those concerns in a very relevant way. The first one, of course, use it yourself. I think there is hesitation on some faculty's part of using the technology because they simply aren't familiar with it themselves, and they don't want to appear foolish or use something that they don't have full comprehension of. And in many cases, the students are more facile, more savvy with generative AI than the professor. That's an awkward place to be, right? If you're the one who's supposed to be teaching. Point number two, right? Experiment with and in front of students, even if it doesn't go right. That's a fantastic point. These are fallible systems. We know that they don't provide perfect results. You're looking for a B- result at the best. And I think the power of showing yourself using it, modeling that behavior and showing that things go wrong, that's a really powerful best practice for anybody who's trying to use this in a classroom. And then third, boy, observing how students are using AI, right? There's a wide spectrum of uses. I'd like to dig in that a little bit more, and then we're going to return to your collaboration point. What have you seen? Like, what has surprised you? I hear the words you say, but can you make that come alive with some examples?
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of surprised how little actually my students use AI. And I think it's similar to with professors sometimes. Like we're afraid to use AI, and that's not a good place to be with new technology. But a lot of what I see, some things that I see is just straight up just asking plain questions. And we can think of this, if you think of this from a writing professor perspective, right? We're trying to teach students rhetoric or the context around writing. What are the things that give our language meaning, that give a text meaning, that give a task meaning? And one of the things that we run into pre-chat GPT is writing research papers and essay papers that really have no context, which AI does great doing, but we've always writing professors always kind of fought against the 5-paragraph essay about what caused the Great Depression. Why are students writing about that? Who's reading it, and what's the purpose, kind of thing. And so we see the same issues then as they approach ChatGPT. Is they don't necessarily know, or they're not necessarily making that contextual knowledge explicit, and then they're disappointed by the output. One of the things, and then you have the students who are keyed into that, and then and they start playing around. So I wouldn't even say like it's the students who are willing to take risks and play around. And actually, now that I think about it, that's who the good writers are. So like, in order to become a good writer, you have to experiment, you have to take risks, you have to fail sometimes. And it's the same way with AI. And the problem with the system, from my perspective, has been is that we actually instill fear into students about writing as well. So students actually don't learn writing as well in the university because we've made them afraid of it. They're afraid of getting a grammar mistake marked wrong. They're afraid of getting a D or a C or whatnot. And that's why I don't actually give grades on writing. But so I see the same thing, I guess, with AI. But then the ones that are willing to play around. One of the students that one of the quotes that really got to me in the early days when I was showing students ChatGPT was that one of the students realized they said, what I like about AI is that I'm able to prompt it to prompt me. So they're seeing there that they're already seeing there that this is a collaborative back and forth. Like it's not Google where you're going to get the answer. It's something where you have to work together to negotiate with AI to figure out what it is you want. Sometimes you don't even know what it is that you want, and then to negotiate what that exactly is and what it's going to look like.
Yeah. So your point about student usage is an interesting one. Earlier today, I was on a call with a senior faculty member at a university, and she was commenting how some of her best students at their school actually avoid AI purposely because they're afraid of being found, afraid of accusations of plagiarism. And so some of the most academically talented students actually are shying away because of the fear of it and because of the ambiguity around when it can or can't be used. And if there's ambiguity, the easiest way to avoid the ambiguity is just to avoid the situation entirely. And as she pointed out, we're not doing our students, we're doing them a disservice if we're actually disincentivizing from using a technology that is prevalent in the workplace that they're actually entering. And so higher education needs to figure this out. So you've touched now a couple times on collaborative AI. What does that mean to you, right? In a classroom or in a classwork environment? What is collaborative AI to you?
Well, so I really think that, and this it kind of goes back to the creator economy. It also goes back to some of the things that I do with tech writing, design thinking, that the best work is collaborative work. And the more diverse minds that you have, the more innovative, the more effective that group is going to be. So we assign people group work. We assign group work. When we assign group work, we don't say, oh, well, that's the students aren't going to think as much because they're thinking together, right? So we don't say that. So really, it's natural to bring AI in as just another one of those diverse minds. And I would say the way things are evolving too, it's going to be more than one AI in order to create that diversity. And so looking at how students solve problems, right? So if you look at the creator economy, for example, it's not just a person creating content and then publishing it and then we're done. Actually, most of the effective creators are writing in public and among a community and collaborating with other creators. And so people's content really isn't their own. It's something that they've created together. And so it's actually a natural step then to say, oh, well, how can AI come in here and level up this content? And we also see that in a lot of tech writing as well. If you look at when you're creating content at scale at a company like Motorola, for example, there's no such thing as one single owner of a piece of content generally. Now, the collaborative process might look differently in different companies, but there's always multiple people at different points of what they would call the content workflow. And so it's natural then to think, well, at what point can we bring AI into this workflow that would be most effective in the process? So it's not really about, because we see writing or a content creation as a workflow, as something that can be broken down into all sorts of different steps, different places, then it's not about, AI can't take that over. There's no way. There's too many pieces, but it can be inserted into places where it works the best. So yeah, I kind of trailed off there, but so really collaborative AI just means, figuring out how AI can fit into what already is a collaborative process.
Yeah, I mean, collaborative AI definitely is the opposite end of the spectrum from, I think, an initial knee-jerk reaction some academics and schools had, which is human good, AI bad. We need to detect the AI, right, and stomp it out in order to ensure that we protect critical thinking and reasoning and creativity. And obviously, you don't take that view. So talk about like the best practices. How do you introduce AI and allow students to use it such that it becomes supportive and not a substitute for critical thinking and creativity, right? How do you just not have students go into the AI, put in a prompt, and just take it out and turn it into the assignment, and they've done no work whatsoever?
Yeah. Oh, I've had students do that, but it's actually only a few students have done that, and actually they usually stop by the end of the semester because they realize it's not actually working. But so probably, I guess the best practice that that I would give for that account is to give students meaningful and purposeful things to write themselves that then they can feed into AI, or have them do certain kinds of work first, and then see how AI comes into it. So just like I just said, like, you know, collaborative AI is about bringing AI into a process that's already collaborative. So for example, I teach, one of the things I do is design thinking cycles, which is basically a problem-solving method that people use in a lot of different industries. That you go through a certain process, you try to understand the problem, you try to identify what the problem really is, then you ideate solutions, and then you prototype and test those solutions. So, and so obviously you can ask AI to take this problem through a design thinking process, and it'll do it, but it's going to be pretty fake and contextless and not tailored to the specific situation. So, but I think AI is absolutely necessary to use in the design thinking. This is what I've come to after using it, playing around with it in the design thinking process. It's going to be absolutely necessary as a part of that process, but it's where you bring that into the process. So for example, I'll have students go and research the company, take their own notes. They'll do an interview with the business partner, take their own notes. Actually, I started taking their transcripts and creating some notes with AI with that, but they do the highlighting, they annotate it, they have conversations about it, they take more notes. And then on their second interview, they come up with some more questions to ask, but then they can put all that into the AI and say, okay, what other questions might we ask that we might have missed? And the response that they're going to get from the AI is going to be way more tailored to the work that they've already done, than if they just said at the very beginning, what are some questions I can ask this business partner? You know, kind of thing.
We've got a question from Eduardo, please. Eduardo.
Hi, pleasure to meet you, Lance. Wonderful to hear what you're doing in class. In a similar way, I teach two classes: systems thinking, you know, mapping the system, and I also teach another class which is apprenticing with a problem. This is for a business department at Lynn University. Apprenticing with a problem is design thinking. So listening to you, and I've been thinking through this also for my mapping the system class, is there a way, or have you come across some way to do role play? Because Watson Institute, which is the institution I work for within the management department, is very experiential in the way we deliver our classes. I mean, they're workshops, you know, they're not lectures. So everything is very hands-on and very experiential. Have you come across or have you used AI in a role play model? I mean, when you do mapping the system or when you do design thinking, can you provide steps to AI using different, you know, AI tools to actually role play and instruct AI to keep them guessing and moving forward and answering questions and keep, you know, it like a tree, like a decision tree kind of way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually don't do a lot of role playing in my design thinking. A lot of their interactions are actually real with the business partner, but not actually role playing. But I think if I were to do, I mean, I have created chatbot tools that I wouldn't say are necessarily role playing, but they are playing a specific role in the writing process. So, for example, to a medium editor giving comments on their writing from the human-centered quality perspective is one of the ones that I created, or a chatbot that I've created a chatbot that takes them through idea generation, but through a specific heuristic that I teach. So they're not just asking for for ideas from a general AI. They're asking it from an AI that's been programmed by my specific heuristic, so that they're learning the heuristic as they're interacting with the bot, which is probably the closest thing to role playing that I have. But I will say, I think from my mind, like creating your own bot would be a really good way to do role playing. It would take a lot of work, I think, to get it to work the way that you want, or even to get it close. So doing like structured prompting is one of the things that I've written a lot about, which is basically just writing long prompts, but figuring out what parts you need and being very specific about what those are, so that you can test it and iterate it more easily, and basically giving the AI all those instructions. And it can still go off the rails, but it can kind of follow those. It can do pretty well up to a certain point. Now, I will say that I looked at Microsoft Copilot a month ago, and then my university took away access, so I can't look at it now. But one of the interesting things about Copilot was that you can actually put those decision trees in there. So like you have the prompt that you can put in there, but you can also have like, oh, if the student says this, then here's the prompt chain that you might go through. So you can actually build a more complicated model. I can't tell you if that works or not, because I haven't been able to play around with it. But that's kind of what came to mind when you talk about role playing.
I will try it and I'll let you know, because that's my goal for this fall. I'm putting together, the curriculum, not the curriculum, but some exercises for the mapping the system. So we'll see how it goes. I have another question though, and since you brought the in-person internships, I do that as well. I have a work-based learning course, and I take students and they spend time solving a challenge for a company. And this happens in Madrid on the summertime. And I wonder, I mean, it'd be interesting to see, how I can introduce AI. Interesting of what you said, but what you're doing seems to be more process rather than practical. Am I okay in making that assumption?
I'm not sure what distinction you're making between process and practical.
It seems that the guidance, the way you're using AI in those study abroad, is to define process, and I'm looking at ways of using AI to try and see how can I solve an entrepreneurial problem, solve a challenge, in the company, by using AI. Am I correct?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So instead of doing instead of like solving a problem actually with AI, well, and I think the main thing that my students so far get out of going to these companies is actually seeing and hearing how these companies are using AI, which is actually pretty different from what you're going to get from the mainstream. Because say for example, Pareto, it's a company I work with, Hitachi Energy, like they have higher concerns than we do about security, and also the amount of content they deal with is higher. But they actually see how these tools are developing and how writers are using it in the workplace. And actually, I don't think we could solve a problem for them with AI because they wouldn't they wouldn't take it because they're still like they're solving very complex problems that are probably outside the scope of my students at the moment. But so yeah,
Yep.
but I think for other types of businesses, you probably could. Okay, so give students kind of that background knowledge of AI, and then go through that same process, but instead, okay, what AI tools or approach to AI might solve this problem? I think would actually be a really interesting way to move from that process to practical. I haven't done it yet, so
Yeah.
Well, I'll try it this fall and
yeah.
next, so I'll let you know how it goes.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things I've been exploring is like creating automated workflows with AI, and I think a lot of businesses are doing that. So if you've heard of like I use Make, it's Make. It's similar to Zapier, but you basically connect AI to all sorts of tools to create workflows, and that would probably be one thing that I would think about having students try to solve for businesses. Can create a workflow for them that works, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Okay. We've got a question from Beth. Beth, welcome. Glad you could join us.
Hi, how are you? Thanks, Lance, for being on and sharing your thoughts with us today. I appreciate it. I am going to be working with teams in Slovenia and looking at opportunities to incorporate AI into those teams. But also the research I'm doing is the skill set associated with working in teams. And so what are some of the skill assessment or skills that you're seeing companies want from graduating students with regards to AI?
Oh, with regards to AI, at least, with the interactions I've had with companies, I would say they're not really looking necessarily for skills about AI, but they're looking for the skills that students take with them to use AI. So, for example, being able to problem solve psychological safety. So being able to create an environment where people can take risks and share ideas, those kind of things. I think in the tech industry, a lot of their hiring is actually not, oh, can you use this tool, or can you program with this language, or can you do this thing? It's, okay, are you the kind of person that's going to fit into this company that's going to be able to learn those things in this specific context? So in some ways, I'm not sure that they necessarily have these specific requirements that they use AI. I think probably coming in with some experience of how to manipulate and build AI is probably going to be important in the future. How to integrate it into the writing process. So, for example, a company I work with is Heredo. They create a program that they use to develop structured content, and they created their own chatbot that's trained by structured content. And actually, most of the employees there, so if you go to a demo or if you talk to the CEO, they're like, well, here are some things I tried. They're still not entirely sure what are the number one best ways that AI fits into this, but they're like, well, let's train this thing and then let's see how people work. So probably the number one characteristic that people need is that willingness to play around and to take risks, and to work with people. Right?
Yeah, just general curiosity. Yeah, my research is based on transversal skills, which you've identified most of them, collaborating, psychological safety, listening, problem solving. And so that's good to hear, because then AI just becomes a component within that skill set that they add on top to it. Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Great. Did I see a hand go up? Let's actually, oh, yes. Hey, Thomas, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, good. Lance, it's excellent. I'm sitting back here listening to what you've been saying, and it's fantastic. It's some of the issues that I'm focusing a lot on lately is how do we overcome the barrier of actually deeper penetration of AI into decision making, and some of the models some of the activities you've been talking about. I find that working with companies and working with, well, other academics for that matter, is this sense of distrust, of not understanding the AI's output. How did the AI come to that position? Which is basically me saying explainable AI. And I think until we can do something deep about explainable AI, we're going to continue to bump into these walls. We're going to continue to experience these limitations of getting people to fully buy in. Now, when we tinker with our own models, we can enhance our explainability, but still we have a lot of problems with explainable AI, and that also transfers into academia, where we want to do academic integrity work, and we want to convince professors that we actually have a process to move forward beyond the traditional use, turn it in to check plagiarism, this kind of thing, and to adopt less of a punitive approach, seeing AI as being a creative process that can't be referenced the way traditional static sources can be referenced, and so on. And it really, a lot of this stuff all comes down to explainable AI, in terms of breaking down a lot of these barriers. And I have many of this. I mean, for example, I try to use AI in conflict resolution, because I'm in regulatory affairs in the life sciences and the applied sciences, and so, and it's really interesting. It's a very handy tool, but you end up with still the same problem when you want to take it upstairs to executives of, well, how did you deduce this? I mean, how did we end up with this? Can you give me the data? Or if we're doing risk assessment of chemicals or risk assessment of medical devices or pharmaceuticals, until we have explainable AI, we can't get regulations changed to be able to allow these sources of information to be accepted in risk management processes. And so, I mean, these are all the issues that are similar to what you were talking about, but in my areas, in my domains, in terms of how do we move this to the next level? And I don't know, I would just like to get your reaction on that.
No, yeah, actually, I'm a really big proponent of moving towards explainable AI. I mean, honestly, I don't use AI in some of the ways that a lot of people do, as far as like, doing like hardcore research or certain kinds of analysis, unless I know how the AI is doing the analysis. Then I might use it to help think through some things, but I'm not necessarily going to use it as as a hardcore research component. And I think one of the key components, and that's one of the issues that people are looking at in the technical writing field as well, science and medical writing. How can we use AI? We can't use AI if it's 90% right. It's got to be like 100%. And how we do that? We can't do it if we can't explain how it's coming to its conclusion. And I think one of the key components is going to be knowledge graphs, and that's kind of my next stage of exploration is exploring different ways of integrating. Structured content is one level of that, like, so taking your content and making it organized. But then there's another level that companies are looking at, and taking your knowledge in a specific domain, shoes, for example, maybe, or environmental technologies, and then creating a knowledge graph on that, and then integrating that into AI, so then it actually uses that knowledge graph to kind of search through its content and to connect things, and you can kind of explain, you can kind of more easier see how it's come to a particular conclusion. And I actually think that is a place where humanities should be participating in. Like, we should be creating knowledge graphs. Students can learn a lot from creating knowledge graph, and we can also participate in the building of some of these models. At UNCW, we're actually starting a humanities center on humanities and the research of intelligent systems. And one of our goals is to look at how we can build some of these models that are more explainable, more dependable. So if you're creating a model that's going to talk about religion and religious research, how do you, what kind of data is it using? How is it mapped? Doing all those kind of things that it actually should be us doing, not necessarily developers. And I think that, honestly, I think that's the next big step in AI from my perspective.
Great. Other questions from attendees today, or if there's other folks that want to share some of maybe best practices they observed? I see several familiar names who have, I know, had interesting applications. Great. Shani, I was actually hoping you were going to raise your hand. Welcome.
Hello. So Lance, some of the things you talked about, I can't remember which assignment, but you meant it involved interviewing, and had them annotating their notes from the interview. In the past years, I've been working with AI in my composition classroom. Some teachers have been afraid that this is, even, just general public have been afraid that AI is going to actually isolate folks more. And, there's this stereotype that Gen Z is already, disconnected and doesn't know how to engage face to face. I encounter those stereotypes, right? And I love that you mentioned the interviewing in your assignment, because I've started designing more of my assignments to be that face-to-face dialogue, and then using the AI for more, some additional context and input, and then annotating. One thing I teach is reading for lower level skill students, and physical annotation is a huge key to reading comprehension. So actually utilizing some of those nuts and bolts with this advanced technology is a great marriage, frankly. And it's teachers who are like, well, how do I catch the student if they're using AI, right? And I'm like, well, you got to change your assignments, make them go out and have experiences, have them write reflections, have them take selfies at the museum you send them to, and then go to AI to learn more about the context and build that in that way. Don't keep your students just sitting at a desk, and so that's some of the beauty coming out of it. And I love hearing that you're getting a lot of positive results as a result of something similar.
Yeah, in fact, this semester or last semester, I really focused on face-to-face class time, and what I would call coaching. So instead of focusing a lot on homework, bringing that, it's a flipped classroom that's been around for a while, but focusing on the work that we're doing in the class as groups together. And then my value then is as a coach to help them as they're working on these problems, rather than checking boxes or ticking off rubrics and all those things. I think kind of the text-based, content-based approach to education. I mean, it was dying a long time ago, but I think AI just kind of is put the final nail in the coffin. But because now content's everywhere. That's not the measure of how smart somebody is, or how effective you are. It's not how much you know or how much you remember. It's really what you can do with it and how you work with people. That's what people. That's basically how that your value. I mean, if you want to talk about value.
Yeah. I love that you call it coaching and mention the flipped classroom, because AI is really revolutionizing. It's forcing the teachers who are wanting to just stand behind the lectern and lecture to actually do that flipped classroom that many have been very nervous about. And it's not so scary. It's actually very invigorating. And AI really is making teachers do that. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Right. Other folks, anybody else have a comment or question for Lance, or something they'd like to share? So Lance, just continue on a stream you had earlier. So the creator economy. So you and I mentioned and talked about the creator flywheel, right? Would love to hear your thoughts on that and how it applies to the use of AI.
Yeah, and so I mean, in a sense, this is not a reaction to AI. I was doing this before AI, but I think it is a good good response to AI. But thinking about writing as more of a cycle than a linear process, and that's not necessarily a new thing, but what creators do is very similar to the design thinking process in that they try to understand a problem or an issue or what they want to write about. They identify it and then they write about it and then they test it in social spaces. They get feedback and then adjust that. And so you would, for example, write little. So in my classes, I have students write what we call micro essays. So those are 250-word essays. They can be whatever topic they want, or in the domain of their professional expertise, and they post them on it used to be Twitter, but now it's Substack or LinkedIn, and they get feedback from other students, from other audiences, and that helps them figure out, oh, what they're going to write next. And then, oh, now I'm going to write a longer blog. How did writing those micro essays help me do that? And this is where then AI can step in and be like, okay, well, here are the 3 ways that these micro essays connect, or here's how you might expand this micro essay into a blog. And so what the creator content or the creator flywheel does is make it so that you're developing your own original content, and then the AI, you're feeding that to AI so that it's augmenting what you're doing. It's not taking over the content. It's not writing stuff for you. It's just, taking a strategic, collaborative partnership to help you move forward faster, or even expand on new ideas, kind of thing.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think it's got applicability to other disciplines besides writing. I was a management major. We did a lot of, case studies, looking at cases. Now as an entrepreneur, I do a lot of, voice the customer, customer role interviews. But now with AI, I can use AI to enhance some of that, right? You could take a case study and ask it to take on the role of a CEO, and then ask it to take the role of a CFO, and then take on the role of a board member, right? And not use that as a substitute, but as an augmentation to your understanding of the case. But what you just discussed, though, sounds like a very responsible use of AI, right? It's a student who is using AI to augment their understanding, to enhance their writing, versus simply prompt output submit. How do you teach that? Is that something you outline at the beginning of class? Is it part of the rubric that you apply to the grading? Is it all of the above? That's a pretty I don't want to say advanced because it shouldn't be advanced, but it actually is, right? Way of collaborating with AI, responsible collaboration.
Yeah. Can I say I've been successful at it? I don't know, but I don't have any proof of that. But I really just focus on the micro essays, writing it. Now, one of the things I did do that was probably the most effective thing, I thought about one semester, all right, we're going to teach prompting. I'm going to show the students how to do structured prompting, and it's going to help their writing. But then, the whole building chatbots came along, and I started building chatbots based on my course material. And honestly, that had an amazing effect way more effect on students' writing. So they could go to a chatbot that's been programmed by me to submit their writing to and get specific feedback and interact with. I could give them instructions on how to interact with that. And I know it's not going to go off the rails. I know generally what it's going to say because I've structured the prompt that I put inside the chatbot. And so I would say that's probably the most effective thing I've done, but focusing on what is it that you want to write, what you have, and what's meaningful for you and your audiences. And then, AI is just then kind of a tool. And honestly, and we experiment. I say you can use it however you want. If you want to try to generate a micro essay, you can. It's actually harder than you think, and to write a good micro essay. But so by the end of the semester, most of them are not using AI to generate their texts because they've realized, well, it takes more work, or or they see the value of creating their own content and then using AI to make that better rather than just letting AI take over. Contrary to what a lot of people think, most students don't want to cede their writing, especially their important writing, to AI. I think that's a key thing that that people think, oh, well, all the students want to do is cheat. Well, not if you give them something important to write that they care about.
Well, great, Lance. We're almost at the end of time. Let me give you time to make any closing thoughts, things you want to leave our participants. This gets viewed a number of times on our YouTube channel. A lot of the accelerator participants, the vast majority of them actually watch this asynchronously. So any closing thoughts for our accelerator cohort?
Yeah, I'm really interested in, I've really been enjoying using Boodle, if we want to talk about Boodle, and being a way of like inserting that context, creating your own knowledge base and then bringing other voices into the AI process. I haven't used it in a class yet, but I'll be really interested to see how that works. And I think that I would be very interested in to hear how other people are using it. Again, what it comes down to is for all of us to understand how AI is working, we need to not fear AI, but experiment with it and share those experimentations with each other. And so I'd love to connect with everybody wherever you are. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, also on Substack, iceoffice.com if you want to check out my Substack. But I'd love to connect with anybody who's interested in exploring AI more.
Great, Lance. And so Lance Cummings on LinkedIn. Is there an email address they can reach you at?
Yes, lance.cummings@hey.com. That's he.com.
Okay, great. Well, Lance, thank you for being our main panelist today. Appreciate your insights, your thoughts. Thank you for being a member of the Leadership Council for Boodlebox on collaborative AI in higher education. And thanks to all of you for being great participants, for continuing to support this accelerator webinar series. We've got some great additional sessions coming up. If you're enjoying this, please share your colleagues and peers. There'll be a follow-up email that has this recording. You can forward that to folks who may be interested in having them sign up as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.